The ballroom glowed with chandeliers, their light scattering across golden drapes and polished marble floors. It was the kind of night meant to celebrate power and wealth, a gathering of international business leaders, dignitaries, and investors. Every detail had been perfected. The wine, the music, the tables adorned with orchids and crystal glasses. But behind the perfection of the evening, there was something else, a current that always hums in places where money and status overshadow humanity. At the far end of the room, a man in a tailored black uniform balanced a tray of champagne glasses with quiet precision. His name was Marcus. He was young, tall, and carried himself with a poise that seemed to surprise people when they realized he was just a waiter. Marcus had dreams beyond this ballroom, but tonight this was his role: to serve, to ensure the glasses were full and the plates were cleared, to remain invisible in a room that did not see men like him as equals. The guests were loud with laughter and conversation, each competing to tell the most extravagant story of deals closed and fortunes made. Among them sat Mr. Jiang, a billionaire from China whose reputation preceded him. He was known for his ruthless business acumen, but also for his arrogance. He enjoyed the way people watched him, the way his words carried weight, as though every syllable deserved applause. His entourage laughed at everything he said, eager to remain in his good graces. As Marcus approached his table, tray steady, Mr. Jiang's sharp eyes landed on him. He tilted his head slightly, studying the young waiter with the same detached curiosity one might reserve for a painting. Then, just as Marcus bent to place a glass in front of one of the guests, Jiang leaned back in his chair, smirked, and said something in Mandarin. The words tumbled smoothly from his tongue, coated with mockery. The group around him erupted in laughter. The sound was sharp, cruel, and it hung in the air like broken glass. Marcus straightened slowly, tray still in hand, his dark eyes steady. He didn't know the exact words yet, but he knew mockery when he heard it. It was a sound he had heard in different accents, in different rooms, all his life. One of the guests, still chuckling, leaned toward another and whispered in English, just loud enough. He said, "The waiter looks like he belongs on the street, not in a room like this." Said he probably can't even understand the language of real business. The laughter grew louder, echoing off the marble. Marcus stood still, and in that stillness, something powerful began to rise in him. He could have walked away. He could have kept his head down, continued his duties, swallowed the insult the way so many in his position had been forced to. But something inside refused. Not tonight. Not in this room. Not in front of these people who thought dignity was a privilege that belonged only to them. He set the tray carefully on the edge of the table and looked directly at Mr. Jiang. The room seemed to shift, the laughter softening into curiosity, the air thick with expectation. And then Marcus spoke. In fluent, clear Mandarin, he replied. The words were sharp, precise, and carried the weight of intelligence and pride. "It is a shame," Marcus said, his voice steady, "when a man of your wealth does not have the grace to respect another human being. True strength is not measured by money, but by dignity. And tonight, sir, you have none." The effect was electric. The laughter died instantly, replaced by a stunned silence. Eyes widened, forks froze mid-air, and glasses hovered in suspended motion. Mr. Zhang's smirk faltered. His confidence cracked. He shifted in his chair, caught off guard by the fluency, by the elegance of the very man he thought unworthy of acknowledgement. For a moment, the ballroom was silent enough to hear the orchestra pause between notes. Then, from somewhere in the room, a single clap rang out. It was hesitant at first, then stronger, then joined by others. The sound grew until applause filled the space, swallowing the silence that had once protected cruelty. Marcus did not smile, did not gloat. He simply picked up his tray again and moved on, as though the moment had cost him nothing, though in truth it had cost him everything. The risk, the courage, the refusal to be small. But as he walked, his heart thundered, not from fear, but from release. He had spoken, and in speaking, he had reclaimed his humanity in a room designed to deny it. The night did not forget that moment. Guests whispered about it long after the applause faded, long after Mr. Zhang forced a tight, embarrassed grin and attempted to recover his composure. Some admired Marcus quietly, too afraid to say it aloud. Others dismissed it, telling themselves it was just a waiter's outburst. But everyone remembered it, because it wasn't simply about words in Mandarin. It was about the mirror Marcus had held up to them all, exposing the emptiness of wealth without respect. Later, when the banquet ended and the lights dimmed, Marcus stood outside beneath the night sky, breathing deeply. The air was cool, and for the first time all evening, he felt it fill his lungs freely. His phone buzzed with a message from a friend. "Heard what happened inside. Proud of you, brother." Marcus smiled faintly. He hadn't done it for applause. He hadn't done it to be remembered. He had done it because sometimes silence is a wound too deep to carry. And that night, in that ballroom, he had chosen to heal. But this was not the end of the story. What Marcus could not yet see was how that single act of courage, that single reply, would ripple far beyond one man's embarrassment. It would spark conversations, challenge assumptions, and inspire others who had been told their voices were too small. Because dignity, once spoken, cannot be silenced again. The days after the banquet carried with them a strange kind of energy. The story of the black waiter who had silenced a billionaire with his own language traveled faster than Marcus could have imagined. Guests whispered it to colleagues, who repeated it to friends, who shared it over dinners and in offices. Soon, it was no longer just an incident. It was a tale, a parable retold with awe. Some exaggerated the details. They claimed Marcus had quoted ancient Chinese proverbs or delivered a speech so grand it left the billionaire speechless for hours. Others minimized it, insisting it was nothing more than a waiter showing off his language skills. But beneath the embellishments and dismissals, the heart of the story remained the same. A man who was expected to stay silent had chosen to speak. Marcus continued with his life quietly, but he felt the ripple of what he had done. Strangers looked at him differently at work, some with admiration, some with suspicion. A few whispered encouragement as he passed, their voices low, almost conspiratorial. But others muttered warnings. You have to be careful. Men like that billionaire, they don't forget. And Marcus knew they were right. Men like Zhang had built empires by crushing obstacles, not by being humbled in public. But Marcus did not regret it. Every night, when he lay in his small apartment and stared at the cracked ceiling, he remembered the applause, the silence before it, and the look on Zhang's face when his own language had turned against him. That memory reminded him that dignity was not a gift to be handed down by the powerful. It was a birthright, something no one could strip away. What Marcus did not expect was for the story to reach across oceans. In Beijing, an online forum buzzed with heated debate as translated accounts of the incident circulated. Some called Marcus disrespectful, saying he should have known his place. But many others praised him, calling him 勇敢的人, a brave man. Chinese students studying abroad retold the story as proof that arrogance, no matter where it came from, could be challenged by truth. Back in Marcus's city, a journalist requested an interview. At first, he refused. He had no interest in being paraded as a symbol. But the journalist persisted, explaining that people needed to hear from him directly to know it wasn't just a rumor. Finally, Marcus agreed. When the interview aired, it was simple, almost understated. He didn't boast. He didn't make the moment larger than it was. He only said, with quiet conviction, "Respect is the language every human being deserves." I spoke in Mandarin because I wanted him to understand me without translation. But the real message was never about the words. It was about dignity. Those sentences spread like fire. People quoted them in social media captions, painted them on protest signs, and repeated them in classrooms. For many in the Black community, Marcus's act became a metaphor for something deeper. It was about reclaiming space in rooms designed to make them feel small, about speaking with the voice that had been silenced for generations. But Marcus remained cautious. With every interview request he turned down, with every praise-filled message he left unanswered, he reminded himself of something his grandmother used to say, "Baby, don't let the world write your story for you. You hold the pen." Yet the world, it seemed, insisted on writing anyway. One evening, as Marcus walked home from a late shift, he passed a group of young Black students huddled outside a cafe. They recognized him instantly. One of them stepped forward, nervous but determined, and said, "We just wanted to thank you. You don't know what it means to us to see someone stand up like that. We're learning Mandarin too. And when they tell us it's too hard, we remember you." Marcus felt his throat tighten. He hadn't thought of himself as a symbol, but here they were, carrying his courage as if it belonged to them too. In their eyes, he saw the weight of what he had done, not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever been mocked, dismissed, or underestimated. Still, the story wasn't without backlash. In certain corners of the internet, voices rose to condemn him. Anonymous accounts accused him of disrespecting Chinese culture, of seeking attention, of fabricating the entire incident. A few even sent threats, promising that he would regret humiliating a man of power. Marcus read some of the messages late at night, the glow of his phone staining his face in the dark. He wondered if he had made his life harder, if speaking had closed doors that silence would have kept open. But then he remembered the faces of those students outside the cafe. He remembered his grandmother's words, and he chose not to shrink. Weeks turned into months. The billionaire Zhang eventually tried to reclaim his image, donating to charities and granting interviews where he spoke of respect between cultures. But those who had been in the ballroom that night knew the truth. His carefully crafted humility was born not from conviction, but from the sting of being humbled. Marcus, meanwhile, enrolled in evening classes. Not in Mandarin, he had already mastered that, but in international relations. He wanted to understand more about the systems that allowed men like Zheng to believe they could strip others of dignity without consequence. He studied late into the night, often balancing textbooks on his lap, while his work uniform still clung to him. And though he never sought fame, his name lingered in conversations, a quiet reminder that courage need not be loud to be powerful. One day, months later, Marcus was invited to speak at a community event celebrating Black excellence. He almost declined. Public speaking wasn't something he craved, but something urged him forward. On stage, beneath the bright lights, he looked out at the crowd. Faces of every shade, every age, watched him with anticipation. He took a breath and spoke slowly. "What happened that night wasn't just about me," he began. "It was about all of us. It was about the truth that no amount of money or power gives anyone the right to strip another person of respect. Dignity isn't a luxury. It isn't something you earn only when you're rich or educated or wearing the right clothes. It belongs to you the moment you are born, and the day you decide to stand in that truth, whether in English, Mandarin, or any language. The world has no choice but to listen." The applause was thunderous, but Marcus didn't hear it as celebration of himself. He heard it as an affirmation of every voice that had been silenced, every person who had been told they were less. When the event ended, he stepped outside into the cool evening air. The city lights shimmered in the distance, alive and untamed. He walked slowly, shoulders squared, heart steady. Somewhere deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. His life was not defined by a single moment in a ballroom, but by what he chose to build from it. And as he moved through the night, Marcus carried with him the certainty that he had not just answered a billionaire, he had answered history itself. Because in a world that often mocked, diminished, or dismissed Black voices, Marcus had spoken with clarity, with courage, and with pride. And the echo of that truth would not fade. Not tonight. Not ever.